Well, I'm seldom caught off guard, but today I'm going to introduce a guest that I've never had before, Ionic Column. Welcome.
Welcome.
I mean,
Thank
all
you.
campiness aside, your character is Ionic Column from the play Hot Greeks, but your real name is Steven Satirycon.
Correct.
Now, that's got to be one of the greatest stage names I've ever heard for someone in a play called Hot Greeks.
Total kismet there. I've been performing as Steven Satirycon since 2005, and I had not even heard of this play until, I believe, 2009.
Right.
So,
now, is this your usual costume?
well, I tend to get a lot of roles that involve me wearing not many clothes. So.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
This is, pretty much standard for our show. We don't have a lot of costume changes for Hot Greeks.
Right. So tell me about what is the plot of Hot Greeks?
So Hot Greeks is actually based on the ancient Greek play Lysistrata, which was a sex farce, sort of, about the women of Athens deciding to withhold sex from their husbands, the soldiers, until they ended the Peloponnesian War.
Right. I mean, at the time, and when it was written over 2,000 years ago, it was a very political.
Oh yes,
play.
feminist,
Yeah.
actually, and yeah, so it was very, very modern for its time. So the Cockettes back in the 1970s just got a hold of this material, and they decided they were going to retell the story of the Lysistrata in the form of a 1940s college musical. So in this version, it is the cheerleaders whose footballer boyfriends in Athens University have decided to reject the fraternity pins of the footballers until they choose not to play their big football game against Sparta State.
And so the cheerleaders are not going to be very cheery for the Athenians.
Exactly. They're mad. They feel like they're being ignored by their boyfriends, and so Lysistrata, who's I believe the head cheerleader, cooks up this scheme, and the faculty is infuriated because nothing can stop the big game, and hilarity ensues.
Well, and in a sense, this is a new. I mean, it sounds like the plot is pretty straightforward. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's. Great that it can actually retain social relevance in a lot of ways. There's it's interesting because in the 1940s these college musicals were sort of in the wake of the World War, and there was this sort of echo of with the GI Bill, people were going to college, and it was encouraging people get an education, it's fun, and and it was kind of like trying to ignore the terrible war that had just happened. And then Lysistrata, of course, is a comedy, but it's also dealing with this subject of this war is being fought, and more recently there's Iraq, Afghanistan. There's, for better or for worse, always wars. So
right.
This sort of material always has a certain kind of relevance.
So you're taking off your shirt to make a political point.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the character Ionic Column.
So there are three columns. The three most commonly known forms of Greek columns: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Each of us can be distinguished by our unique capitals.
Yeah.
And we are actually we form the Greek chorus of the show. We at one point are part of the football team, but other than that, we mostly serve to sort of comment on the action of the play. So we're the only characters who are essentially inanimate objects that happen to be.
Well, and if, for those of us who were high school geeks and actually studied Greek theater, the chorus were the people that you could actually trust.
Yes.
Because the chorus told you what was really happening.
Exactly. Not narration so much as just orating the truth of the situation. And we frequently do that in our parts.
Now, in the green room, when you were getting dressed or undressed for this interview, you told me that you were also a high school theater geek. I mean, you actually knew about Greek drama before you started acting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was more fascinated by Greek mythology than anything else. That was what drove me to sort of research these things. Of course, Edith Hamilton's mythology, I think, is fairly commonly required reading in high school. But I had picked it up when I was in 6th grade. I thought it was fascinating, just like the whole world of the drama of these gods and goddesses and mortals being tormented and everything. It was just something that always really sparked my imagination. And so I was I also was very interested in the idea of bardic lore, Orpheus and the Orphic mysteries and things like that. So I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on Greek theater, but it's certainly like just like all the concepts, and also like the fact that Greek theater was it was sacred. It was part of a ritual. It was the harvesting of the wine. Dionysus was actually a god of theater, and just all those components of sort of like theater as this sacred magical thing was really what drew me to like the Greek mythos.
Right. In a sense, we've had cast members from the Cockettes on. Of course, the Cockettes and all the people associated with it over the years are an iconic part of San Francisco's cultural history. But there's a seriousness to it. I mean, what I find interesting is doing this play, Lysistrata, as a Cockettes musical is not that far off. I mean, there was a lot of bawdyism and sex in Greek theater.
Absolutely, yes. And actually, the Cockettes, I of course, through all this work that I've done with the Hypnodrome and the Cockettes, I've learned so much fascinating stuff, and just to hear like the way the performances were back in the late 60s and the early 70s, like again, like it was ritualized in a lot of ways. Like it was very like I remember there's a short film about the creation of their Halloween show, Les Ghouls. And Fayette Hauser, who is one of the surviving members of Cockettes who lives in LA, was shown painting these magical sigils on plastic to be hung in the theater. And I remember she was describing that scene to us one time live, and she said that they had this big book of like this magical tome that she was getting these symbols out of. It was, they considered this to be like something of ritualized significance. It was sort of like creating this magical space that was meant not just to entertain, but also in some way enlighten the audience and take them somewhere,
Right.
Especially after the LSD kicked in.
So leaving aside probably the LSD from this production, what is unique about this production of Hot Greeks?
What is unique? Well,
Versus, this is not just a recreation of an earlier Cockettes musical. It has been updated to be pertinent for 2012.
Well, in senses, like I said, especially because of the echoes of war and whatnot, there are certainly, like the show opens with with the finale of the tragedy Ajax, which this is a student play that the football team and the cheerleaders are watching, and this is
which of course takes place at the end of the Trojan War.
Yes, yeah. And so so the show begins with this very avant-garde sort of staging of Ajax, and that's played fairly straight, so to speak, and that's how the show begins, and. There's Scrumbly, who's of course our musical director and also who wrote all the music for this originally 40 years ago, was basically created this version of Ajax just specifically for us, and deliberately has directed us in sort of like this is like about World War II, soldiers coming back shell-shocked. It's about, the soldiers, coming back from Troy who are missing limbs. It's also, about Iraq and Afghanistan. It's like, these are all echoes of the same sort of a situation of these, soldiers coming back to their home after war. And, after all that heavy-handedness, it's a fairly light touch throughout the show. But, there's, as I said, like still so much social relevance about, these issues about like women's role in society, and and the part that sex plays, for that matter, in war and education, and sort of.
Obviously, it's a fun play to do.
Yes.
But now, as an actor, which obviously this is not your first play, and you've done other work. Is it hard to do a serious role with your shirt off?
I don't know that I've ever done a serious role. Quite honestly,
your talents were realized early.
Yes, I tend toward comedic and body, and I've gotten cast as prostitutes and porn stars and villainous, or people of questionable morals more often than not. So this is
this a reflection of life, or are these difficult parts to play?
Well, I've never actually been a prostitute or a villain that I can think of, nor a porn star. But I am very comfortable in my body, and I am, frequently known to my circles as like the first one who would take my shirt or my pants off in a given scenario. So
well now the next time you do a TV interview, they'll know where to hook the mic.
Yes, I hope.
Now you've been rehearsing the play for a while. What do you think the reaction is going to be to Hot Greeks?
Oh, you know, like I was actually, we originally did Hot Greeks as a one-act play several years ago, and I also had a role in that one. I wasn't playing a column. I was actually playing a cheerleader in that one. But this is the re-expanded version. It's now a full 2-act. We've reinserted 3 songs that were in the original that we had cut originally. Scrumbly also has expanded it slightly with a little bit more material. You know, it is just, it's just pure fun. Like really, I don't know how better to explain it. It's just, I mean, people really, I mean, it was a very short run the first time we did it, and people were clamoring for it. They were, I've gotten, to this day, people telling me, like, why don't you bring back Hot Greeks? We want to see Hot Greeks again. That was so great. And, you know, now we're actually giving it really its due, I think. And it's just such a giddy sort of, you know, like, it kind of does have that sort of like can-do spirit, you know, like if you actually have seen a 1940s college musical, it's just so like,
gosh, I got a barn, we have a stage, you can sew costumes, we can do a play.
Yeah, exactly. And there's really, you know, which was, you know, ultimately also kind of the attitude of the Cockettes, you know, like there is like, woo, we got a theater, let's
bring it on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Steven Satirycon from Hot Greeks. Next up, our conversation with Julio Salgado, talking about art for immigrant rights.